The Israelites had an enemy called the Syrians. And the Syrians had come into Israel and they had just stolen people. They had taken children and women and men and taken them all back to Syria as slaves. Well, among the group that was taken back was a little Hebrew girl. And she was very sad. I don't think we can even imagine what it was like for her. And the captain of the army, Naaman, decided to keep the little girl at his house. So she did have a nice house, and she had a bed to sleep in and food to eat. But can you imagine what it was like that first night when she went to sleep? She didn't know whether she'd ever see her mother and daddy again. She didn't know how she was really going to be treated. Oh, she would have given anything to have been able to get down on her knees and pray with her mom, to have her mother kiss her good night, and the tears ran down her cheeks, and she cried herself to sleep. Well, Captain Namaan had her become the servant for his wife. And his wife was very kind to her and very sweet to her. And after a while, the little girl began to sort of forget about the fact that she was so homesick. And then one day she went in to the wife, Naaman's wife's room, and Naaman's wife was hanging her head down, and she looked so sad. And the little girl said, "Ma'am, is something wrong?" And she said, "No, nothing you can do anything about." And then the little girl realized that her mistress was crying. And she said, "Oh, please, please tell me what's wrong." And she put her hand on her shoulder and she said, "Maybe I can help." And the mistress said, "Oh, nobody can help. Your master, Naaman, my husband, has leprosy, and you know what that means." Oh, they all knew what that meant. It meant Naaman would have to leave home. He'd have to go outside of the city and sleep with the lepers in the caves, and then he'd never be able to see his wife again, and eventually he would die a very painful death, and he'd no longer be a captain in the army. And the little girl said, "Oh, ma'am, that's awful. That's terrible. But you know what? I think I can help, because there's a prophet in Israel where I came from, and he's able to get his God to make people well. Why don't you send Captain Namaan to Elisha the prophet?" Well, the mistress told Naaman when he came home, and he was all excited, and he said, "I'll go to the king right away and ask permission to go." Well, when he told the king about the fact that there was somebody in Israel that could make him well, the king said, "Listen, you pack up good things, money and gold and silver, and you go and see if they can make you well, and I'll send a letter to the king that says, I want you to make my servant Captain Namaan well from leprosy." Well, now that's not what the little girl told him to do, but that's what Naaman did. He took gifts, and there were horses and others that went with him, and when they got to the palace of the king, they knocked on the door, and the servants said to the king, "There's a bunch of Syrians at the door, and they've got a question, a letter for you." And so the king said, "Well, send them in. I suppose they're going to start another fight." Well, when they came in, they handed him the letter, and they said, "This is from our king in Syria, and we wanted you to have this. We have a request." And the king opened up this letter and he read, "I want you to make my Captain Namaan well from leprosy." And he said, "What is this? I can't make anybody well from leprosy." And he began to tear his clothes, and he was all excited, and he said, "This is just an excuse for you to come back and fight us again." And one of the servants said, "Oh, wait a minute. We have a message from the prophet Elisha. He says to send Naaman to him." Oh, whew. The king said, "Okay, that's fine." And he drew out a little map, and he said, "Look, you just follow this map, and you go see Elisha. He'll make you well." Well, Naaman took the map, and he and his servants left, and they went to see Elisha. When they got to Elisha's house, they knocked on the door, and Elisha's servant Gehazi came to the door, and they said, "Gehazi, we've come to see your master Elisha, so that he can make our Captain Naaman well from leprosy. Would you please bring Elisha down?" And so Gehazi said, "Just a minute." And he ran up the steps, and he got upstairs, and he said, "Elisha, guess what? Captain Naaman from the Syrians is here, and he has leprosy, and the king has sent him to you to make him well." And Elisha said, "Well, you go down and tell him that if he goes to the Jordan River and he dips down underneath the Jordan River 7 times, God will make him well from his leprosy." And Gehazi said, "Elisha, he's a captain in the enemy army. Don't you think you ought to go down there and tell him that?" And Elisha said, "No, there's no reason for me to tell him. It's God who's going to make him well. Just go down and give him my message." Gehazi thought, oh boy, this is no way to treat an Assyrian captain. But he went back downstairs and he said to the servant at the door, well, my master Elisha says that your master, Captain Namaan, should go to the Jordan River and dip down in it 7 times. And when he has dipped down in it 7 times, he'll be cured of his leprosy. And Naaman's servant said, where is your master? Well, he's upstairs. Well, why didn't he come down here and talk to Captain Namaan? Well, he said he didn't need to because it's God who's going to make him well. He's not coming down? No, I'm just giving you the message, and if you go dip in the Jordan River 7 times, God will cure you of your leprosy. And the servant said, this is a really weird way for anybody to act. But okay. So he went back to Captain Namaan and he said, Captain Namaan, I have good news. Elisha, the prophet, says that if you will go to the Jordan River and dip down into it 7 times, that God will cure you of your leprosy. And Naaman said, you got to be kidding me. I am supposed to go dip down in the muddy, filthy, mud-slick Jordan River? I've got 2 beautiful rivers at home, the Parfar and the Abana. I don't need to go to the Jordan. And they said, no, you don't understand. It has to be the Jordan. Well, I'm not going to do it. I'm going home. That's just silly. And where in the world was Elisha anyway? He didn't even come down to see me. And the servant said, look, Naaman, you're dying with leprosy. It's the only hope you have. Now, please, just go try it. Well, Naaman was a reasonable man, and he said, I guess you're right. I'll go try. So he went to the Jordan River. It was muddy, and there were sticks floating in it, and leaves that had fallen in it, and the mud would go through your toes. And Naaman stepped in it, and he said, oh, ick. They said, go on, get out where it's deep enough so you can dip under. And so he waded out into it with the mud going through his toes, and he got way out in the Jordan, and it was deep enough, and he said, okay, here goes. And he held his nose, and under he went. And when he came back up, he looked at his hands, and he said, I told you it wouldn't work. Look, I've still got leprosy all over me. None of it's gone. They said, no, Naaman. Do it again. Do it again. You have to do it 7 times. Oh, this is just making a fool out of me. But he went under again, and he came up, and I've still got leprosy. Again. Do it again. Under he went again. That's 3 times. Under again the 4th time. And he came up, and he said, look, I've got leprosy all over me, just like I had in the beginning. This is just silly. They said, Naaman, he said to do it 7 times. If he'd told you to do something really difficult, you'd have done everything to get that done. Go on, this may not be pleasant, but at least it might cure your leprosy. Come on, do it again. So Naaman went under 5, 6, and he came up the 6th time, and he still has as much leprosy as he had when he walked in. And he said, look, it isn't doing any good. It's just making a fool out of me and getting mud in my hair and between my toes. And they said, Naaman, please just do it 1 more time. Oh, he said, all right, I'll do it once more. So under he went, and he stayed under a little longer this time. And when he came back up, he's almost afraid to look. It's gone. The leprosy is gone. It worked. It's wonderful. I'm clean. And let's go back and thank Elisha. So back they went to the house, and they knocked on the door, and Gehazi's been watching anyway, and he runs down to the door, and he says, well, is your master well? They said, absolutely. All of the leprosy is gone, and we've brought gold and silver and cloth to give to you, to thank you for making our captain well. And he said, well, wait just a minute. Let me run up and tell Elisha. So he ran upstairs to tell Elisha, and Elisha said, Gehazi, we can't take any of those things. God made him well. God has to get the glory. You go back downstairs and tell him we're glad Naaman's well, but that God made him well, not us, not the Jordan River. He just obeyed God, and you tell him we don't want the gold or the silver or the cloth. And Gehazi said, couldn't we take just a little bit to give to the prophets that live up on the mountain? Go, Gehazi. God gets the glory. Well, Gehazi was very sad about that, but he went back downstairs and he said, well, you know, I'm so thankful, and so is Elisha, that Naaman is cleared of the leprosy, but God is the one who made him well, and Elisha says we can't take the gold or the silver or the lovely cloth because we don't deserve it. Only God gets the glory, and so thanks anyway, but go on your way. And Naaman and the servants rejoiced, and they got on their horses and they turned around and headed back. They thought it was a little odd that nobody wanted to take any of the great presents that they'd given them. And Gehazi went back inside the house and he thought, this is just not fair. Elisha may not have done anything, but I ran up and down the stairs a whole lot, and I gave the message, and there's no reason why I couldn't have a little bit of that stuff. I need a new mat for my bed, and I need a new cloak. And so he very carefully went out the door, closed it softly behind him. And he ran after the chariots. And when he got there, he said, stop, stop, wait just a minute. And they all stopped, and they said, here comes Elisha's servant. Wonder what he wants. And the servant said, well, Elisha has decided that we could take some of the gold and silver, and we could share it with the prophets. They need food. And so it's okay if I take a little bit. And they said, fine, load him down. Well, when Gehazi was loaded down with stuff and he couldn't carry anything else, he said, bye and thanks a lot. And he turned around and headed back to the house. Well, when he got to the house, he had to carefully open the door, let it close very softly. He went into his room, and I guess he stuck it under his bed. That would be as good a place to hide it as any. And after he had stuck it under his bed, he heard Elisha say, Gehazi? Yes, Elisha? What are you doing? Nothing really. Come up here, Gehazi. Gehazi thought, oh no, he couldn't have seen me. He couldn't have heard me. He went upstairs, and Elisha said, Gehazi, you've taken gold and silver. You've taken the glory away from God. Now, pull your hands out of your pocket and look at them. And Gehazi pulled his hands out of his pockets. No. The leprosy from Naaman was on Gehazi. Now, Gehazi has taken the glory away from God, and that was absolutely wrong. But you know what? Naaman had to completely obey God. And because he did what God told him to do, which sounded a little silly, he went to the Jordon River and he dipped in 7 times, and not until he'd gone down the 7th time was the leprosy gone, but he was clean from the leprosy. And you know what? Peter, the Apostle Peter, preached a sermon, and he told us how we can be clean. He said that first of all, we have to change our thoughts and our actions. We have to act differently and be sorry when we've done the wrong thing. And then, if we're baptized, God will wash away our sins and give us the Holy Spirit to live inside us and help us be better. And then, when people see you, that you're completely clean, and they'll realize because of the way you act and the way you think that you're a child of God, and God will get the glory.